there. How you doing? And welcome along to another edition of the 116. My name is Greg Fish. It's a pleasure to have you with us here today. This is the podcast about living life higher, wider, closer, and deeper. The 116 is a presentation of First United Methodist Church in downtown Peoria. Don't forget to like us and share us on social media or on your favorite podcasting platform, whatever the vernacular is, like or subscribe or follow, perhaps. It's all free, and it helps you to stay up to date with all of our broadcasts, and it helps us get the word out when you like us and share us. Go to peoria1.com for more information about us, or to leave a message if you have any questions or would like to follow up on anything that you hear here today. And with that in mind, I am so pleased to welcome into the studio today two guests who are part of something really exciting that's coming back to life this year, because after this long, crazy pandemic, one of the important parts of the life of First United Methodist Church is coming back live and in person this year. And we are so happy to tell you that Lessons and Carols is coming back. Now, some of you will go, yay, Lessons and Carols coming back. Some of you will be going, what? Huh? So we're going to answer all of your questions this year about all of this and get you really excited about this very special Christmas presentation. And to do so, I want to introduce my guest to you. I have with me Laura Ream, the master clinician for this Lessons and Carols. You like that title, do you?
I'll work with it. Thank you.
That's a good one. All right. We'll just... never mind. Well, I said we'll call you clinician for sure, but that's not even good, is it? You're a vocal music teacher at Washington Community High School, and you direct the Philharmonic Chorale at ICC, and you're the vocal jazz director at Bradley University, right?
Yes, correct.
All right. That's a lot of work. You have a lot on your plate, don't you?
That is also correct.
And now you're joining in for the Lessons and Carols, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And we have Dr. John Orff, who is organist extraordinaire at First United Methodist. This guy is just an extraordinarily talented musician. He's also the interim director of traditional music for us right now. So that means that planning Lessons and Carols has fallen upon your stout shoulders, and you are the man for the hour. You're the man for the job, aren't you, John?
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. All right, very good. So let's just get started this way. One of the interesting things that we discover in taking a serious look at all the stuff that we do is that so many things in the life of the church actually are fairly contemporary in nature, even the things that seem traditional. A lot of the traditions that surround our Christmas celebrations actually aren't that old in a long-term historical perspective. And such it is with many of the songs we treasure, and such it is with Lessons and Carols. And John, you did an outstanding article recently, which, by the way, go to peoria1.com to check out that article. But you found out some really interesting things about this idea of Lessons and Carols. So let's start here. What in the world are Lessons and Carols?
Thank you, Greg. Lessons and Carols is a service or festival of 9 scripture passages that present the Bible's telling of the nativity story, the birth of Jesus Christ, and what it means for humankind. There is a fascinating history, as you alluded to, with Lessons and Carols, and it is fairly recent. The first documented instance of this service that we really know of is a bulletin published in 1880 in Cornwall, southwestern England. And it was meant to bring people out of the taverns and into the church to celebrate the true meaning of Christmas. And different churches and cathedrals throughout England started taking note and doing their own versions of this after Truro Cathedral set the example. But Lessons and Carols, as we know it, really begins in 1918 at King's College, Cambridge. Okay. So there was an army chaplain who had seen the horrors of World War I up close. And he had seen how the effect of war having decimated an entire generation and leaving millions mourning in its wake, how this had hardened people's hearts. And he wanted to, he believed that the gospel offered a remedy to help people deal with their grief and bereavement and to reawaken purpose even after the face of loss. And so he had learned about this happening in Truro nearly 40 years earlier. And what he did was he codified 9 particular passages of Scripture, starting with Genesis 3 and ending with the opening of the Gospel of John. And these are the lessons of lessons and carols. I can tell you want me to help you with a question, so I'll just put one more thing out there. These have remained unchanged at King's College, Cambridge since the year 1918.
Well, and this is part of the conversation we had beforehand, and that is the word lessons. Because when we think of lessons, we think, schoolwork. And actually, it's just the name for the fact that in this program, you learn some important things about the history of Christ in lesson format, along with music, right?
Right. And so the music will change from year to year, and King's College has then instituted a program of commissioning new music by all sorts of composers. But there's this wonderful repertory of carols, new and old, and these bring the lessons to life beyond the printed text, and so they can illustrate the wide emotional implications of what we hear about in the lessons.
And John, what is there a definition for the word carol? I mean, obviously we wouldn't apply carols to like contemporary Christmas songs. Rocking Around the Christmas Tree isn't a carol. How do we understand the term carol?
It's a musical genre that's actually thousands of years old, having to do with joy and festivity, and it has pre-Christian history for all sorts of pre-Christian festivals. But as with so many things, the church in its evolution, they saw in these activities a kind of a pointing to the true source, as it were, and it wasn't really until the 19th century that carols got brought from the traditions of people assembling and singing at people's doors and traveling, and which people still do, but as part of an actual worship service at Christmas Eve.
And Laura, have you ever actually worked with a lessons and carols program before, or is this your first go around with such a program?
This is my first experience with a lessons and carols format.
Okay. What are the similar things to what you've done before? And I mean, when you see it, say, oh, this feels familiar to me.
The choral music that was selected for this, similar to what I have worked with across the board in the ensembles in which I work, the high school students and the adult choir. There are similarities, in choral singing that will cross across the types of ensembles and the makeup of the ensembles. Okay. So I was familiar with some of the composers that were chosen, and simple practical things, the layout of the music on the page, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Those sorts of things cross over easily into what I've worked with before.
So when it comes to assembling the music for a lessons and carols program, where do you begin? Do you begin with what others have done before, or is there a certain level of innovation to what you do as well? Where do you begin?
Well, with the premise that each musical selection follows a certain reading of Scripture, you want to program in such a way that you have a chance to reflect on the lesson you've just heard. And there are any number of ways that can happen. It can be a literal setting of the words of music that have been read, or it can be a piece of music where there is a message that takes these ancient texts more into contemporary needs. So one example, the fourth lesson is the dream Isaiah saw, and it is the vision of the eternal peace where the lion lies down with the lamb and the child can stick his hand in the viper's den and not get bit. But I discovered an original piece of music by Glenn Rudolph, so not a pre-existent carol, but it had lyrics by Thomas Troger, who is a wonderful poet and sacred writer. And this was a piece that was commissioned in the wake of the September 11th tragedy. And it is a plea, a very urgent plea for peace, which begins in A minor and then by the work's end ends in an exultant C major, and it's bring the dream Isaiah saw, this plea for justice and peace.
Yeah. You know, when we look at the tradition and the deep tradition of Christmas music, I realize that personally, I feel kind of shallow myself. When I came here, this was the first time I'd ever heard of a Lessons and Carols, at least that I remember. And it's a really interesting concept. But my tradition in Christmas music has been, I had a mom who listened to Johnny Mathis Christmas albums, and that's kind of where, I love that music. Just out of curiosity, before we get to the makeup of this Lessons and Carols, tell me a little bit about your wheelhouse when it comes to Christmas music. What speaks to your heart when you think of Christmas time? And Laura, I'll start with you on that question.
I grew up in a house with all sorts of music being played on records all the time. And so I tend towards sentimental music, but that was Johnny Mathis. It started
Sure.
The Letterman's Christmas album, Herb Alpert, and the Tijuana Brass Christmas albums, things like that. I was involved in music in high school, and I had several opportunities to interact in more of a classical setting. And so I had a diverse experience growing up. And so I have appreciation for all sorts of music. As I have gotten older, I recognize more that those sentimental ties are important for audiences.
Sure.
And so when I program for groups that I work with, I look for pieces or sounds that connect the audience to perhaps memories that they hadn't accessed for a long time.
Are people longing for that more now than ever before, as far as coming through this pandemic when things have changed so much? Do you find that people are longing more for the familiar?
Very much so. Not only as a consumer, but as a performer. And there is such a demand right now for this sort of programming, for live music to come back again in all formats.
Right. John, talk about your music wheelhouse for Christmas celebration.
I grew up with a number of beloved Christmas classics, Charlie Brown Christmas Special, and Frosty and Rudolph and all that through television.
Nice.
Listening to carols by English choirs, although I couldn't tell you which choirs those were necessarily, but also Boston Pops, symphonic arrangements of beloved carols, and the holiday season was not complete without them and without singing them in church in Advent and Christmas. And then later, the more deeply I got into music, the more I encountered Christmas cantatas by Johann Sebastian Bach and a sacred literature that went beyond the favorite and favorite tunes that I personally sang.
Nice. Nice. So let's take it from here then. The listener is thinking, oh, this sounds like a really interesting way to spend my Christmas. I really want to check this out. When they come to First United Methodist Church in downtown Peoria, what are they going to experience from the time they walk into the room to the time they leave when they come to Lessons and Carols? What is this evening going to look like? And I'll let you two just divide that up between you however you wish.
Oh, I guess I'll start because this will be the eighth such service I've assisted.
Okay.
And I've primarily assisted as an organist in those recent years. But what I've noticed is there's all sorts of Christmas celebrations around the area, which I believe to be a good thing. In fact, there's so many. Sometimes we run across collisions because there's so many celebrations, and
right.
I would rather have that than a lack of celebration. So
sure.
But I would say while there are some places that put on, I'd say, a bigger celebration or a more secular celebration, this Lessons and Carols at First United Methodist has a reputation for heart and depth and a real connection to what we as people need this time of year. And that will be apparent in the music and the affects it brings forth. There's a title. Lessons and Carols doesn't always have a subtitle, but that's been a tradition here at FUMC. And very recently we have arrived at tidings of comfort and joy.
Love it.
And that covers everything because there's been so much fear and anxiety in recent times, of course, underscored by the pandemic and everything related to it. And we do need comfort and joy. Yeah.
But Lessons and Carols is both a visual as well as audio experience, right? Auditory experience is what I'm trying to say. When I've noticed that there's a lot of decorations, a lot of lighting that goes along with this. Is that not the case this year?
The church will be decorated as it customarily has been. There will be an orchestra with the sanctuary choir and soloists. Our interim handbell director, Heather Hill, is leading the Bells of Praise, and there will be appropriate lighting for the music and readings that we hear.
Very good. Very good. Awesome. So, Laura, what are you looking forward to when it comes to this presentation that you think, I want to make sure people know about this because this is going to be really awesome?
One of the great experiences in preparing live music is the first time that you put an orchestra with the choir or start the synthesis process.
Sure.
And I think that's very rewarding for the performers as well as the audience. The audience hears more of the finished product, but I still get excited when I hear things come together for the first time.
Yeah. By the way, just an interesting side note to the audience as well, as the traditional sanctuary here at the church is an old dome-styled facility. So be careful what you whisper because somebody across the room may hear you. It's got some really weird acoustics, but wow, does it ever bring the music alive when you get that orchestra in there and the choir? Even if that's not the type of music you normally listen to, that will be just a goosebump experience for you. Do you have that? Even though you've heard this type of music over and over again, do you still get those goosebumps when you hear music in a hall like we have here for the first time?
So absolutely. Laura said a moment ago about people needing to hear live music. I wholeheartedly concur. That's been my observation as well.
Yeah, live music is always so much better anyway. I mean, any format of music, anywhere from the orchestral music to bluegrass music, it is always better. Jazz, it's always better live. I think there's something about it that's not quite as accessible. Why do you think that is? What is it about a live experience, especially in a season of year that is such an emotional, I want to use the word touchy-feely, but I guess that's a good way of putting it, time of year for us?
I think that it's important to see musicians applying their craft, applying their art, and being able to observe that firsthand is important. You can see it on a screen, but you may not understand the depth to which someone is working to perform. And when you see it live, you're much more able to see that. You're able to see the whole picture where the screen offers you whatever the screen decides to offer you. And that, I think, is important in preparing this and as a whole experience with lighting and all of the elements together, it becomes more impressive when you see it live.
Yeah. You feel that way too, John?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the music the folks will be hearing then. From the familiar to maybe the not so familiar, what will we be hearing this year at Lessons and Carols?
Where should we begin?
With the program, why don't you talk about the pieces in the program and I can follow up.
Well, it will begin with a festive overture, a Boston Pops classic, Christmas Scherzo, a medley arranged very brilliantly by Don Sebesky. And then we will hear the lessons. The first lesson establishes the fall of humanity and the need for a savior in Genesis 3. And so I reached really back into medieval territory because there aren't too many hymns about Adam or the fall, but there is one called Adam lay bounden, and there's a brilliant arrangement by Boris Ord. So we will hear that a cappella. And then Genesis 22, Abraham nearly sacrificing Isaac, which Christians have understood as a prefiguration of God the Father's actually sacrificing his only begotten son. for the sins of the world, that will follow with a congregational hymn called "Lo, He Comes with Clouds Descending," the very high English cathedral style. And then verse 3, which talks about a light shining forth in the darkness. We'll hear an American Appalachian folk tune, "My Song in the Night," and out of that will emerge Felix Mendelssohn's "There Shall a Star from Jacob Come Forth."
Nice.
And that's the first third of the lessons, and then the dream Isaiah saw, and then Jesu, the very thought is sweet, another medieval devotional text set by Mac Wilberg. And then we'll have a Black American Christmas spiritual, "Mary Had a Baby." Handbells will ring, "It Came Upon the Midnight Clear." We'll hear a French carol, "What Is This Goodly Fragrance?" immediately followed by African Noel, very skillfully arranged with "Go Tell It on the Mountain." And then there's a magnificent setting of the Father's Love Begotten. And then finally, brand new setting of "Let All Mortal Flesh Keep Silence." And then, mirroring the tradition in King's College, Cambridge, all the forces will combine, including congregation, to sing "Hark the Herald Angels Sing."
Nice. That he pretty much covered most of what. Laura, what's your favorite piece from the carols?
That's a great question. I appreciate, I think, the intentionality with which John chose the texts and the pieces and the music and the repertoire overall. I do really appreciate "My Song in the Night," because there's another setting of it that I was familiar with, but I wasn't familiar with this one, and I always appreciate learning a new arrangement, new approaches to the same melody. And so that's probably one of my favorites. And it doesn't have an overtly Christmas text, but it does very much tap into a certain emotion. And it's very effective when a composer will pair words and music and arranging together all of this to create something that will speak to not only the audience but the singers as they prepare.
Yes, yeah. So, what should the listener expect when they come in here? Why expect's not the right word. What should we do to come to prepare ourselves for what? Because this is going to be just a really lovely, pleasing experience, both in our senses as well as what we hear and so forth. How can we best prepare ourselves for a lessons in carols? Is it something that's good to with prayer, with a family meal? How would our listeners best prepare for lessons in carols?
With open ears.
Okay, nice. I like that. Perfect answer. Yeah, with open ears. Anything else about lessons in carols that excites you, that you say, hey, I really want to make sure I say this before we go?
I would say, too, that to prepare to be challenged. These are not necessarily familiar pieces all. In fact, a number of them were new settings to me. And again, listening for that interaction of text and music and how it fits together with the orchestra and listening to hear what that communicates is very important. That's part of the work for the audience to do, as well as the musicians preparing it.
Very nice. You know, another important factor here that would probably be good to close on is the fact that, just thinking about the time that we've just come through and the concerns we still may have about the safety of being out in public. And fortunately, I believe right now our numbers are doing better, but there's a month, almost a month. It's a little bit earlier in December, and we'll give those dates in just a moment. So what should people do as far as, will masks be required still?
We're asking, this is not the kind of thing we can force, but we're asking people to come. We hope that people have made the choice to vaccinate themselves in light of the current best available public knowledge. We have been asking people who come to our worship service as a consideration for their fellow neighbor to please wear masks. I know that we are all ready to not need masks anymore. It is encouraging to see numbers go down, and may they continue to decline. we would just, in the spirit of loving our neighbor as ourselves.
Sure.
Please take that precaution, even though we're all ready to move past.
Yeah. Do we know yet if we're going to ask for pre-registration?
I don't believe we know that at this time.
So just kind of keep your eye out on our Facebook page, for example. We'll let people know that information, or the website peoria1.com. We'll have that right there on the front page. How much does it cost to attend, and when is the concert, John?
Admission is free.
Nice.
This is something that's been a boon for the community over many years since this church has done it. And the dates and times are Saturday, December 11th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
and Sunday, December 12th at 11:15 a.m.
Very good. Very good. And we are looking forward to that. Thank you so much both for taking time out of your, what's becoming a day full of practices as well. Are you practicing a lot these days? Does it take a lot of practice to put something like this together? I'm guessing it probably does. Is it kind of an overwhelming thing?
Definitely. Everything I'm doing right now has a lot of rehearsal to go with it.
It must be so rewarding, though, once you've gotten through all that rehearsal and then the performance time comes and all those things that you wonder, will this ever work out? Doesn't it just kind of always seem to work out on performance day?
It does. It's not quite as simple as that sometimes, but it is. But it is very rewarding. It is very rewarding, and I think it's important for the participants to see that the hard work that they put in then does pay off at the end.
Very nice. And just Laura, before you go, where else might we find you working this holiday season? Any special holiday events you're a part of that you'd like to give a quick plug for as well?
At Washington High School, we are opening our musical, Anastasia. That opens on Thursday. It runs Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of this coming week.
And let's give the date of that because somebody may be listening to it after the date. So.
18th, 19th, and 20th
of
November. Mm-hmm. The Philharmonic Chorale has their concert on Sunday, November 28th at 2:30 at ICC at the Performing Arts Center. Nice. And Bradley Vocal Jazz performs this Wednesday at Dingledine Music Center at 7:30.
All right. John, are you pretty much occupied here at the church this year, or do you have any things besides this?
Pretty much. Well, you might know I already play core keyboard in a new music group called Alarm Will Sound. Increasingly, I've also been playing in present music up in Milwaukee and other mostly solo piano performances. I can tell you that as Laura's done with choral preparation, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work. I've ordered singer masks, which have come in for everyone singing. I've created MIDI practice tracks. I've become an orchestral librarian and contracted players in a couple cases from great distances. But it's all what needs to happen for this to be the service it needs to be.
Well, we are looking forward to it, and we are just so thankful again for your time here. And by the way, if you have any questions for us or for Dr. John Orff, you can contact us all through the website peoria1.com. You'll find forms on there you can send in to contact, and you'll also find little buttons on the staff page that you can send email to us directly. So if you have any questions or any follow-up questions for anybody, feel free to send those along. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you both in our studio, and have a blessed Christmas.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
All right. And the podcast you've just heard, The 116, is a podcast about living life higher, wider, closer, and deeper. It's a presentation of First United Methodist Church in downtown Peoria. Don't forget to like us and share us on social media. We're available on all podcast platforms as well as YouTube. Be sure to follow, subscribe, or leave a review. That helps us out a lot. And go to peoria1.com for more information about us and to leave us messages, as I mentioned a few moments ago. I'm Greg Fish. It has been a pleasure having you along with us here on the 116. And have a happy holidays and Merry Christmas if you happen to listen to this before said holidays and Christmas.